I'm the owner of Jacob's Cove farm, and I grew up on a farm, and it never really left my blood. I got a scholarship to Utah State as a high jumper and as a basketball player. I was a state champion high jumper in 1970. That dates me, when I was a senior in high school, and I was an all-state basketball player and recruited to play for the Aggies. And I was excited about that. They were rated number 4 in the country at that time. They had some very, very good players, and it was, I just love basketball. But you know, basketball kind of slides to the side, and then life begins. So I went into engineering and agriculture. And after I graduated with a master's degree, I went to work for a very large farming company in the San Joaquin Valley. I don't know, is anyone familiar with the San Joaquin Valley of California? Most amazing place in the entire world. There is just nothing like it. For those of you that have not been there, imagine 300 plus miles long and over 50 miles wide, flat, just agriculture. Every crop that you can imagine is grown there in quantities that are mind-boggling. It's probably the most productive place in the entire world. It's just absolutely amazing. And so I went to work for a farm that had 30,000 acres, if you can imagine, and grew so many different kinds of things. And so I kind of jumped into corporate agriculture and spent some 25 years in corporate agriculture. Ended up being most of that time as a consultant in Mexico, mostly, as myself and others like me brought the Mexican farming from pretty rudimentary to the most high-tech in the world. But I always had a desire to farm, to grow the food. And for years I couldn't figure out how you could do that, someone like me, because there's no way that anybody can compete with Mexico on vegetables. And that's kind of where my passion became, was the vegetables. You cannot compete with Mexico. It doesn't matter where you are, because they've got the labor, they've got the climate, they've got the know-how, and they've got the capital. Huge farms. We helped install systems, you know, growing systems from the irrigation all the way through all the growing systems, 1,000 hectares at a time, if you can imagine. A hectare is 2.5 acres, so 2,500 acres of tomatoes, as far as the eye can see. You just can't even imagine what that's like. And guess where all that produce goes? Right here, to the United States. Hundreds and hundreds of truckloads a day come out of that area to here. And so these folks are great growers. And there's a lot of them that are conscientious and have moved towards organic kinds of production. But they can't compete with Jacob's Cove. And it took me a long time to figure that out, but about 5 years ago I figured that out, that they cannot compete with local. Doesn't matter how big they are, doesn't matter how much money they've got, doesn't matter how good of a grower they are, they can't compete with me because I'm local. And it turns out that local gives you something that you just cannot get any other way. It just is what it is. For example, on tomatoes. They have to pick the tomato at least 10 days green, at least. It's just the way it is, because it takes a day and a half to 2 days to get it to the border. It takes a day and a half to get it across the border. It sits in the warehouse on the U.S. side for probably up to a day, maybe 2 days, and then it's trucked out to some distribution center of a large market, Smith's or Albertsons or whatever it is. And then it goes from their distribution center to the store, and then by the time it's stocked, I mean, you are 7 to 10 days, best case scenario, from the time it's picked till it actually comes on the shelf. Well, it turns out that all of the sugar and the minerals to do their full cycle, all that happens in the last 36 hours of the fruit. And so you pick it 10 days green, and guess what? You're never going to get that quality, ever. And it doesn't matter how good the grower was, it doesn't matter what variety you use, you're just not going to get it. The only way that you can get the quality that you mentioned that we have at the restaurants here is when you pick it ripe. And you cannot pick it ripe unless what? It's grown local. Yeah.
So all those vegetables, are they mostly being driven by trucks like to here from
It's
Mexico?
truck. It's all truck. It's all truck. Yeah, it's all truck.
It's all around the United States.
Yep, it's all truck. Yeah, they'll come out. The two places are McAllen, Texas, if you're going, east, or it's Nogales, Arizona, if you're coming north. And so those two ports, and it goes from there. Yep. And so they do a great job. They really do. And a lot of people think, well, it's not so great, but they do a great job of farming. But the quality is inferior to what you can get locally, and it's just the way it is. The other advantage of a local grower is that you really can compete on price if you do like a CSA, which is a direct marketing. Because in that case, the farmer gets what the farmer would get. He gets what the broker would get, what the distributor would get, what the retailer would get. And so he gets all the pieces, but then you have to do all the work that all of those pieces do as well. So you've got to market it, you've got to deliver it in addition to growing it. And so, but the CSA model works well that way. And it's kind of a win-win because the end user gets this fresh food and the farmer gets a little bit more of the profit, which allows the price to not get too terribly high, but at the same time it becomes something that the grower can actually live with. So I'm going to move down through this just a little bit. I'm going to talk. These are some talking points about CSA. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but you've got the marketing and production delivery in a CSA model, which, does everyone know what CSA stands for, I guess? It stands for Community Supported Agriculture. And so it's a partnership where the consumer is fronting so much money for so many weeks of fresh vegetables, and then that's the money that the grower then uses to produce it. And so it's that's the way it works. If you didn't have that, it'd be almost impossible to do, because to put out the kind of investment that's required, especially the way we do this, and not have the vegetables sold and try to sell it, it would just, you'd go broke. It's just the way it is. Whereas this model, it's a great model. It actually began in Japan, but was picked up by several farms more on the East Coast. And so we have lots of CSAs in the East Coast, in the Midwest, and we're just kind of on the tail end. We're just, in Utah, we're kind of catching up a little bit. So we'll go back to this in just a minute. But I want to talk about organic, because I think it's just such an important topic. What do you think of when you think of organic food?
No pesticides.
No pesticides. Anything else?
Organic fertilizers.
Okay.
I think it's just a label that's being used because trendy too right now.
Okay?
So people are trying to pick up on whatever they can put on their label that says organic because they think people are going to buy it.
Right, right. More expensive. Okay, yeah. Probably all of those things are true. And probably the most important one of those is no chemical. That's probably the most important. And so that includes, the herbicides, the pesticides, and even the fertilizers. And for a lot of years, I had a hard time understanding, what is the value of not using chemical fertilizer, because elemental nitrogen is elemental nitrogen. I mean, it is. And same with phosphorus. But as time has gone on, I've gotten more experience. I've realized that it is important, because if it is so readily available in a chemical form, it adulterates the whole system. And there's some short-circuiting takes place. And the quality of the food, especially the vitality, if you talk about vitality of the food, just does not come up as much as when it goes through a more normal, natural cycle, even though the uptake is elemental nitrogen or phosphorus or potassium or whatever it may be. And so there really is a difference there. But I want to talk a little bit about the label. Sadly, from the get-go, the label is compromised, because organic is a legal term. It has become a legal term. In fact, you cannot use the term unless you are certified organic. And so there has to be a certification in order to actually use the term. It's illegal to do so otherwise. And so it's a legal term, and as a legal term, it is a political term. And so when the regulations are applied to that label, you can imagine what it is. It is the least common denominator of all the interests involved, right? And so it's compromised or not compromised. It's terribly compromised from the get-go because of that, sadly. But that's just the way it is. So that's the first one. Before I go further, I don't like the label organic, at least as it applies to us, because I don't want to be labeled organic. These are the reasons. Well, the first one is it's compromised. The second one is that it's quite single-dimensional in its focus. And so that's when I ask you the question, what do you think it is? There were quite a few answers, but kind of the overriding one was the inputs. In other words, does it have chemicals? And so that's great. It's probably the most important thing, but it's not all of it. It really isn't all of it. There's so many other parts to it that are important, because the objective of what we like to call local natural farming is the vitality of the food. How good is the food? That's really what you're after. And so the fact that there aren't chemicals on it, very important, but it's just one of the factors. There are more. And so it's kind of focused, kind of a single-dimensional focus.